Tell us who you are.
I'm Ashley Capps. I'm a concert promoter based in Tennessee. Our home office is in Knoxville. We have an office in Nashville. We promote hundreds of concerts a year. We manage 2 historic theaters in my hometown of Knoxville. We work with a lot of other venues throughout the southeastern United States. I'm one of the creators, founders, producers of the Bonnaroo Music Festival. Also work on several other music festivals. We have Forecastle, which is on the riverbanks in Louisville, Kentucky. We have a festival in Asheville, North Carolina. We produced it as Moog Fest for 3 years, 2010 through 12. It's now known as Mountain Oasis, the one that we do. And we have a festival called Big Ears and several other concepts that we're working on. And I guess that sums it up.
You've been doing this for a while, Ashley, and I've asked every single person on the show the same question. How did you get started in this music business? Why didn't you take your mom's advice and do something different?
I tried, actually. It's funny. I really did kind of fall into the music business, and I resisted its call for a long time. I was a huge fan. I love to go to shows. I love to listen to music. I bought records. I was the geek who was trying to get all of his friends to listen to this great new artist. And I got a radio show when I was still senior in high school on the local NPR affiliate. It was called After Midnight, where I could play anything that I wanted to for 2 hours from midnight till 2 o'clock in the morning. I continued doing that through college, and as I did that, artists would find out I was playing their music on the radio, and then the opportunities to set up gigs for people who wanted to come to town to play started to emerge. But I did it as a hobby for years because I really had no mentor in the business. There wasn't much of a music business in my hometown. In some ways it was almost like magic to me. And I loved doing it, but I just didn't see it as a way to sustain a living. But it just kept pulling me deeper and deeper in.
Now, before you got sucked into the music business, I can relate to that. You went to college. What were you planning on doing before the calling became too great?
Well, that was part of the issue. I really couldn't settle on just one thing. I thought I was interested in journalism or radio for a while, but I ended up getting a degree in philosophy and religious studies. And I loved that, actually. There was something about academia that I was really attracted to, but I also didn't feel like I wanted to be an academic. And so I struggled for a while trying to find a vocation where I could weave all of my interests together and really enjoy something that I was doing. And I didn't realize music was that for a while, but it really has been. It offers a tremendous opportunity to interact with a lot of really fascinating people, and interface with the worlds of business, the world of art, the world of technology, working with people in communities. It's very rewarding for me on a lot of different levels. So, who knew music would be that?
You told me that you grew up and still live in what would be, a small city by most standards. Certainly not Knoxville, Tennessee we're talking about. And Knoxville is certainly not generally regarded as a hotbed of the music business. Lots of our members on our site have issues, and they talk about why being outside the major markets is a problem. That didn't sound like it was a problem for you. Talk about that whole issue of location and how you managed to overcome that perceived problem.
Well, I guess I didn't really know any better, and the fact that I wasn't really pursuing a career in the music business for so many years enabled me to establish a certain foothold in the region and develop the business that I developed from that. You know, certainly what's going on in the major markets is very important. I think there's a tremendous amount of energy and inspiration to be had by you know, interacting with your peers. I mean, there are so many, you know, really brilliant minds in this business and interesting people that that can be, you know, I wouldn't want to miss out on that. Unfortunately, I get to travel a lot. I've been traveling to New York, you know, since I was a kid. My father had an office there, and you know, I get out a lot, so that helps. But you know, there's another facet of this that I think is interesting. In some ways, I think not being in the thick of an industry city also maybe helps one develop a fresh perspective, and you know, you know, I don't know exactly how to put it, but maybe it caused me to be a little bit more resourceful and forced me to think out of the box in a slightly different and fresher way. You know, it's funny, you hear these phrases. In retrospect, I didn't think at the time that I'm going to build a business by serving underserved markets, but that's what I did. You know, as I started doing shows and enjoying doing shows in my hometown, I started looking for other places in the region where I might be able to take that show as well. I had, for some reason, I had a natural affinity for certain spaces. I really liked historic theaters. And you know, at the time, a lot of the historic theaters throughout the region in the South were, you know, underutilized if they were open. So there were a lot of opportunities that no one was taking advantage of, and you know, it evolved very organically. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. You know, I'd never had a 5-year plan. It was really about you know, opportunities just presented themselves along the way, and we kind of built step by step from that.
Sometimes opportunity knocks in the strangest places. You mentioned that you started booking a small club, which didn't quite work out the way you wanted. Talk about that club and what part it played in leading you to where you are today.
Well, I had a friend in the early '80s who was an architect, and he wanted to become a developer. And he was a real pioneer in that he focused on a really neglected area of Knoxville, Tennessee, which is now known as the Old City. It was a warehouse district that almost no one ever went to at this particular time in the '80s, except to, you know, store stuff. You know, trucks would come in and out, but there was no real active nightlife except one bar, interestingly enough, owned by Cormac McCarthy's ex-wife, and it was called Annie's. But other than that, there was really nothing going on in this particular area of town. But my friend Peter had a real vision of what this could become. And he wanted to take a block of it and restore it and really start to transform that area of town into one of the hip urban centers. And he asked me if I would consider creating a club. And so we worked on it very closely together and found some investors and opened this classic basement club. It held 250 people on a good night. You know, 220 was the actual capacity. And it was a special time in the industry before artist fees and ticket prices had gotten completely out of control. And some amazing artists passed through there. Garth Brooks did his first show in Knoxville there, first on a songwriter's night with 3 other songwriters, and then right after his first album came out. You know, a lot of great jazz artists came through there. Widespread Panic played there, you know, their early days in Knoxville, you know, which is where my relationship with them started, that ultimately, you know, they were the first band to say yes to Bonnaroo. I'm trying to think, you know, my mind just went back, but, you know, John Prine, Wynton Marsalis, you know, all of these great artists would come in. We had African artists, we had blues artists.
250-seat place?
Well, that's what it was a very, you know, it was the late 1980s, and it was just kind of an interesting cusp at that particular time in the music business. You know, there's no way that you could really recreate that now. And, you know, and it obviously didn't last.
Yeah.
But for a while there, it was a remarkable 2.5-year run.
Mm-hmm.
And it really provided me a lot of the relationships that I've managed to build my business with for the next quarter of a century, you know.
Let's talk about Bonnaroo. You know, I always kid around that there's your tombstone resume, right? Which is, it won't be all the things that you wish you were known for to be the thing. You know, I suspect, not that we hope it happens anytime soon, Ashley, on your tombstone it would say founder of Bonnaroo. On mine, it won't say golfer, it'll probably say manager, right? So let's talk about Bonnaroo. Tell me the story of Bonnaroo. How did Bonnaroo come about? It's been around 10 years now, 12 years?
Actually, this will be year number 13.
13 years. Talk about where it started and where we are today.
Well,
Bonnaroo.
What was
the inspiration of it?
The inspiration for Bonnaroo, I mean, for me, it goes back a long way, really. You know, I was too young to go to Woodstock, but not too young to go see the movie. I taught my father into, even though it was like rated R or whatever, I taught my father into let me go see the movie. And you know, I have to say that as a music fan, that had a profound impact on me. And, you know, my wife now, my girlfriend in the 80s, was European. And, you know, I started to realize that there were these festivals that were so iconic for me, but had kind of disappeared at that particular point, were thriving in Europe. And so that was always kind of in the back of my head. I started doing outdoor shows in the 1990s. We didn't have an amphitheater. We didn't, you know, we weren't really competing with an amphitheater. So, you know, we did it the hard way. We went into a park in the center of downtown Knoxville and put up a stage. And, you know, the Dave Matthews Band, Widespread Panic, Fish, you know, The Offspring, you know, so many bands played that. So we probably did 100 shows over the course of 6 or 7 years in that park. So doing something from scratch in basically an open field is something that, you know, wasn't that intimidating to me. Mm-hmm. And I ultimately created a couple of small camping festivals in the mountains of western North Carolina at the end of the decade. After doing the festival, the first camping festival I did in western North Carolina, which had no major headliners on it whatsoever, but completely sold out. We had to turn away people at the doors. It really lit a fire. I met my partners at Superfly sometime around this particular point. I was also engaged with a couple of band managers and a couple of agents who had an idea of taking some of those key artists and creating a weekend event with each one headlining each night in different quadrants of the United States. That actual concept did not really happen, but interestingly enough, those three bands were key headliners for the first Bonnaroo. So and that actually happened at Pollstar. You know, that conversation was at Pollstar in Vegas with the agents and managers, and then while that idea itself didn't come to fruition, that was the same time that I met Superfly. We started talking about the idea of doing something like that in the Southeast. We started eventually looking for a site, and voila.
How did you guys decide on the site? I haven't been to Bonnaroo myself. Maybe I'll come and check it out this year. I hear it's a terrific site. People
it's a fantastic site, yes.
And those are not easy to find. How did you guys find the site?
We were really tipped off to it by someone here in Nashville. We looked at a number of other sites, and we were pretty focused on the Southeast because they were based at the time in New Orleans. I was based in Knoxville, and it seemed like that you know, the opportunity for us was in the Southeast. And we were poking around, looking at sites. We had our feelers out, and someone mentioned the site in Manchester, which had actually been used before. And in fact, as I'd been driving around promoting shows all over the Southeast, I had seen billboards for this festival called Itchy Coo Park, Manchester, Tennessee. I didn't even know there was a Manchester, Tennessee, to be honest. And I was like, Itchy Coo Park, that's really interesting. I wonder what that is. You know, it was interesting also that you couldn't really tell from the billboard exactly that it was a music festival. I didn't know if it was like an amusement park or whatever, but that's how we found the site. We got tipped off to it by someone. We went down and met with the landowner. We discovered that Itchy Coo had fallen short of its projected goals, to say the least, and but you know, there had been a certain amount of groundwork laid there in the community with an interest. You know, they were willing to give it another shot. I think in all fairness, they were skeptical. They had someone come to them before and say, you know, we're going to do this big festival, and you know, 80,000, 100,000 people are going to come, and had it not happen, in our particular instance, it did happen. Yeah. But you know, the landowner was willing to give it another try. The community was willing to work with us, all of which are, of course, essential components to a successful festival like that.
And communities and local governments can be a real wild card and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Here's what's something that's interesting that I looked at. I looked at the bill this morning. You guys are going on sale this weekend.
Right.
With version 13. Right?
Yes.
While it definitely had a decidedly jam band feel in the early days, it's evolved now to a much different place. You know, the bill you have this year is really wider than wide. Talk about how that whole transformation took place.
Well, we didn't exactly set out to create a jam band festival, although, you know, those were artists that we had existing relationships with and that we knew had a fan base that would travel to see them, and was perhaps more eager than many fan bases to embrace the idea of camping for a weekend and having a musical experience. The other great thing about the word jam band is, to me, it doesn't really mean that much. You know, the various ingredients, musical ingredients that jam bands bring to the table are very diverse. You know, there are jam bands that are really bluegrass influenced. There's obviously rock jam bands. There's jazz influenced jazz bands. There's bands that bring in, you know, African influences and so on. So all of the different musical tangents that the bands were bringing in to create their music were also tangents that we could explore in building a festival lineup. But our goal was always to have an amazing music festival. And so each year, the vision is really about how to create that. You know, how do you build the most exciting lineup that we can imagine as music fans, and you know, everything that goes with that. You know, I think one thing that Bonnaroo has become known for is, I think it's diversity and the plentifulness of the music that's offered. I mean, there's so many different genres, and you know, it's a very rich, deep lineup that cuts across a lot of musical barriers. And you know, that's been one of the pleasures of developing and booking the festival, is being able to explore all of those tangents. You know, the music business is constantly reinventing itself. That's one of the most exciting things about being in it. It's a very iconoclastic business. You know, there's great new artists emerging every year, every minute it seems like. And you know, keeping the festival fresh and vital in terms of the musical offerings, as well as the overall experience that we're trying to offer there, is really the motivating principle behind you know, each year of planning and development.
I got to ask you this. I spent some time in the concert business as a booker. In most cases, you know, bookers have a specific area that they tend to feel comfortable in. When I see the diversity of the artists that are on this year's bill, I'm trying to figure out how you guys sort out that bill? Who's booking what? Or is that just the work of one madman sitting there going, okay, we go with Elton John, and then we'll go with what, you know, across the board? How does that work out?
Well, there's always been a group of us booking. So the booking process is really messy, and the people that are involved in it all bring their personal passions to the table, and we are all very, very devout music fans. We search out music on a daily basis. So it's an interesting process, but it somehow works itself out and delivers an amazing lineup. And I'm not really being, I don't really know, let me start over and just say that you know, everybody's very passionate about music. Our love of music also crosses a lot of genres, and you know, we're always keeping our finger on the pulse of what's going on in music, and you know, excited about you know, the new artists that are emerging. So I think as we get into the planning process and start to book the festival, I think you know, we're now evolving from a tradition that is a tradition of plenty. You know, it's a cornucopia. It's an amazing, you know, array of artists to be able to choose from on a weekend. And the fans who actually come, you know, each of them in some way really gets to create their own experience, because you can navigate through so many different choices. But the actual lineup comes together through this process of us sharing our passions, debating what will work and what won't work, and how and why.
Budget ever come into that, Ashley?
Of course.
I'm sitting there trying to sit there with all those bands, everybody hawking for their favorite band. That must be one hell of a
Well,
fight.
there is the budget, but that's not the fun part to talk about.
No, that's not. All right, well, you know what? I want to ask you one final question before you go. And I want to thank you first for taking the time here today to talk about Bonnaroo. And I'm going to try to make it. I might handle you up for a back.
Please come down.
For me and my kid over here, who's like looking. You've had a wonderful ride from kind of thinking about being in the music business, trying to resist the temptation, then getting sucked in. If you were giving some advice today for somebody that's dreaming about doing something big in the music business, and in this case, probably we're speaking to the business types, what advice would you give them if they were sitting here on a chair with us today?
Dive in. Eyes wide open, but dive in. You know, meet as many people as you can meet in this business. You know, find opportunities to work. You know, learn how the business itself works. It's constantly changing. New opportunities are emerging every minute. You know, it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work. It tends to be a total immersion business, not a 9-to-5 job. But you know, if you have that passion and you're smart and committed, I think it's a business that offers a tremendous number of opportunities. And you know, I'm not sure that I'm the greatest example in the world. I think if I were young and knew that I wanted to be in this business, I would probably go to an industry center and you know, and try to just dive right into the thick of it. But you know, these days some of those centers, you know, it's not just Nashville, LA, and New York. You know, it can be Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of opportunities out there to meet people who are major players in this business, who can you know, who will recognize somebody's passion and want to help mentor and offer them opportunities. So it is a relationship business, though. So it's really about getting out there and meeting people.
Well, you're living proof that you don't have to live in New York and LA. As somebody who lived in LA my whole life, it's not gone unnoticed that some of the greatest success stories in the business, yourself, Corn Capshaw, Red Light Management, Charlottesville, Virginia, Charles Attal, who we've also been lucky enough to have on the show in Austin, are all doing great things. And the advice that he gave you folks is dream it and then do it, right? So I want to thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks a lot. That was fun.